What if you had money, status, and power, but you chose to hide all of it on purpose? What if you dressed simply, spoke softly, and pretended to be naive, just to see how people would really treat you? And let me ask you something honestly. Do people respect you for who you are, or for what you own? If you were in my place, would you dare to test the truth like I did? Tell me in the comments, I really want to know. Because I am a mother. And the day I met my future daughter-in-law's family, I decided to play a role that revealed everyone's true face. I have always believed that real dignity does not announce itself. It does not arrive wearing expensive clothes or speaking loudly about success. Real dignity sits quietly, observes, and waits. Life had given me comfort, stability, and more than enough wealth, but it had also taught me restraint. I am a mother. And being a mother means thinking 10 steps ahead, especially when it comes to your child's future. My son was the center of my life. I had raised him with values, not privileges. When he told me he wanted to get married, my heart filled with happiness, but also with concern. Love is important, yes, but marriage is not just about love. It is about families, mindsets, and unspoken expectations. I didn't ask him how beautiful the girl was. I didn't ask about her degree. I asked only one question: what kind of people are her parents? Because I have learned something the hard way: you don't marry a person alone, you marry their environment. When the meeting was fixed, I made a decision that even surprised me. I decided that when I met them for the first time, I would hide everything about my real life. No branded clothes. No jewelry. No mention of business or property. No display of confidence that comes from security. I wanted to see how they would treat me when they thought I had nothing. On the day of the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror wearing the simplest outfit I owned. My hair was neatly tied, no makeup, no accessories. I looked ordinary, almost invisible. And for a brief moment, I questioned myself. Am I doing the right thing? Then I remembered my own mother's words: if you want to know people, don't impress them. Observe them. My son was already waiting in the car. When he saw me, he paused, clearly confused. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then stopped. He understood. Or at least, he trusted me enough not to question it. The drive was quiet. But my mind was loud. I kept telling myself that this was not a game. This was protection. If these people valued character, they would treat me with respect no matter how I looked. And if they didn't, then I needed to know before it was too late. We arrived at their house, modest but well-maintained. Nothing extravagant. I felt a strange calm as I stepped out of the car. The door opened, and my future daughter-in-law's mother stood there. She smiled. But her eyes didn't. She looked me up and down in one quick, sharp glance, the kind that measures worth in seconds. Still, I greeted her warmly and stepped inside. The living room was clean, organized, but emotionally cold. I was asked to sit, politely, yet distantly. Tea was served without conversation. No effort to make me feel welcome. No curiosity about who I was as a person. They began asking questions. What do you do? Where do you live? How big is your house? I answered honestly, but selectively. I spoke simply, carefully. I said I was a homemaker. That we lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city. With every answer, I felt the atmosphere shift. Their tone changed. Their interest faded. I wasn't offended. I was enlightened. My son sat beside me, silent. I could feel his discomfort, his tension. But I gently placed my hand over his and gave him a look that said, "Let me handle this." Then she appeared, my future daughter-in-law. She offered me water herself. She looked me in the eyes when she spoke. Her voice was respectful, warm, human. In a room full of judgments, she felt like honesty. That moment stayed with me. Because it told me something important. The problem was not the girl, it was the mindset around her. As the meeting continued, subtle remarks were made. About standards. About expectations. About how marriages require balance, a word often used to justify inequality. I listened. I absorbed. I stayed quiet. Because chapter 1 was not about reacting. It was about understanding. And by the time we left that house, I knew one thing for sure. This story was only beginning. And the truth, when it finally came out, was going to change everything, the first glimpse of the truth. As the conversation in the living room continued, I became more aware of what was not being said than what was spoken aloud. Their questions had lost warmth and gained calculation. Every pause felt deliberate, every glance loaded with judgment. I had not lied to them, yet I had not revealed myself either, and that silence was doing its work. My son shifted uncomfortably beside me. I knew him well enough to sense his internal struggle. He wanted to speak, to correct their assumptions, to protect me from their quiet disrespect. But this was my test, and I needed him to let it unfold. The daughter-in-law's father leaned back slightly and said, almost casually, "You know, marriages work best when both families are on the same level." His tone was calm, but the message was sharp. I nodded politely. "Levels can mean many things," I replied. He smiled, not in agreement, but in dismissal. It was clear what level he meant. Their interest in me faded quickly after that. The conversation drifted toward expenses, expectations, and how difficult it was these days to manage weddings. No one asked about my values, my experiences, or how I had raised my son. I was being reduced to numbers that didn't exist. And yet, I felt strangely calm. Because now I was seeing them clearly. Then she walked in again, my future daughter-in-law. She carried herself with quiet confidence, completely different from the tense atmosphere around her. She offered refreshments, but more importantly, she offered respect. She addressed me directly, asked if I was comfortable, and listened when I spoke. That contrast spoke louder than words. In that moment, I understood something crucial. This young woman had learned kindness despite her environment, not because of it. And that realization softened my heart while strengthening my resolve. As the visit came to an end, there were formal smiles and polite goodbyes, but no warmth. No connection. Just relief, on their side, that the meeting was over. On the drive back home, my son finally spoke. "Amy, did they say something wrong?" I looked at him and answered honestly. They didn't say it loudly. They showed it quietly. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed every moment in my mind. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was alert. A mother's intuition doesn't scream, it whispers, but it is never wrong. I had entered that house pretending to be poor and naive. I left knowing I was rich in something far more important, clarity. And with that clarity came a decision. I would continue this path carefully. Because the truth, when revealed too early, can be dismissed. But the truth, revealed at the right moment, can never be ignored. Chapter 1 was complete. The test had begun. Polite smiles and hidden insults. The second meeting was scheduled only 3 days later, but in my heart, it felt much sooner. Silence has a way of stretching time. In those 3 days, neither side spoke much, yet everything was already being decided beneath the surface. I knew this meeting would be different. The first visit had been about observation. This one would be about exposure. This time, my son insisted on coming inside with me. His posture was calm, but his eyes were alert. He was no longer just a man in love, he was a son beginning to understand his mother's quiet strategy. The atmosphere in their house had changed. The formal politeness was still there, but now it was mixed with confidence, the confidence of people who believe they have already judged you correctly. Tea was served again, but this time the conversation did not waste time pretending. My future daughter-in-law's father cleared his throat and spoke directly. "We've been thinking seriously about this match," he said. "Marriage is not just emotional, it's practical." That word again, practical. He continued, both families should be aligned. Financially. Socially. Otherwise, misunderstandings happen later. I listened carefully. I noticed how easily he spoke, how natural it was for him to place value on things rather than people. I replied calmly, "Misunderstandings happen when respect is missing, not money." There was a brief pause. Not because my words were powerful, but because they were inconvenient. His wife quickly stepped in, smiling. "Of course, respect is important. But nowadays, expectations matter too. Weddings are expensive, lifestyles are demanding." Then came the question I had been waiting for. "So, what arrangements were you thinking of for the wedding?" he asked. The room felt smaller. "We believe weddings should be simple," I said. "No unnecessary burden. No transactions disguised as traditions." Their expressions shifted, subtly, but clearly. "Oh," his wife said lightly, "we're not talking about burden. Just standards. You know how society is." Society. The favorite excuse of people who don't want to take responsibility for their own thinking. My son finally spoke. His voice was steady, but firm. If society demands conditions for respect, then society is wrong. The daughter-in-law's parents exchanged glances. This was not the compliant response they had expected. Then something unexpected happened. My future daughter-in-law stood up. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "I need to say something," she said. Her mother tried to stop her, but she didn't sit down. "If this marriage depends on money, gifts, or comparisons," she continued, "then I don't want it. I want respect, for myself and for the people who raised the man I love." The room went silent. Her father looked shocked. Her mother looked embarrassed. Not because of the words, but because they had been spoken out loud. "Don't be dramatic," her mother said. "You don't understand how these things work." She looked at her parents and replied, "I understand perfectly. That's why I'm speaking." I felt something tighten in my chest, pride mixed with sadness. This young woman was braver than anyone in that room. I stood up. "Thank you," I said, looking at her parents. "Today, you showed us exactly how you think. And my son and I are grateful for honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." They seemed confused. "You're leaving?" her father asked. "Yes," I replied. "Because when a relationship begins with conditions, it ends with resentment." As we walked out, no one stopped us. In the car, my son was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "Amy, why didn't you tell them the truth?" I looked at him and answered, "Because they needed to reveal theirs first." That night, I received a message from her. "Thank you for today. For standing up. For showing me that dignity still exists." I stared at my phone for a long time. Chapter 2 ended not with closure, but with clarity. Because now I knew something for certain. The battle ahead was not about marriage. It was about values. And the moment I finally revealed who I really was, everything would change. When politeness turned into judgment. The second meeting did not begin with curiosity. It began with confidence, the kind that comes from assumptions already made. I could feel it the moment I stepped inside their home again. The smiles were still polite, but they were no longer cautious. These were the smiles of people who believed they understood exactly who I was. Or who they thought I was. My son sat beside me, quieter than usual. He had sensed the shift too. The first meeting had been about observation. This one was about evaluation. I noticed how the conversation avoided warmth and moved quickly toward expectations. There was no interest in my life, my experiences, or the values I had passed on to my son. Instead, the focus hovered around lifestyle, expenses, and how things are usually done. My future daughter-in-law's father spoke with practiced ease. "We believe marriages work best when both families are on the same level," he said again, emphasizing the word level as if it needed no explanation. I asked calmly, "And how do you define that?" He smiled faintly. "Financial security, social standing, comfort." Comfort. Such a gentle word for such a sharp boundary. His wife nodded in agreement. "We just want to make sure there are no disappointments later. These things matter, whether we like it or not." I listened without interrupting. Silence can be powerful when it is intentional. The more they spoke, the more clearly their priorities revealed themselves. Marriage, to them, was not a union of two people, it was a negotiation between two reputations. Then came the topic they had been circling carefully. "Wedding arrangements," he said. "We believe in doing things properly. Respectably." I understood what he meant without him saying it outright. "Our understanding of respect is different," I replied evenly. "We believe respect is not something that comes with conditions." The room grew quiet for a moment. Not because they were reflecting, but because they were recalculating. My son finally spoke, his voice controlled but firm. "If expectations are placed only on one side, that's not balance. That's pressure." They were not used to being challenged, especially not by someone they believed had little to offer. And then, something happened that none of us had planned. My future daughter-in-law stood up. Her movement was slow, deliberate, as if she had already made this decision long before that moment. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "If this marriage is about comparisons, money, or appearances," she said, "then I don't want it." Her mother immediately tried to stop her. "This is not how things are discussed," she whispered sharply. But the girl continued. "I don't want a marriage where my worth, or his family's worth, is measured in material things. I want respect. That should be enough. The room fell into a heavy silence. Her father looked stunned, not by her words, but by her courage. Her mother looked uncomfortable, not because something wrong had been said, but because it had been said out loud. That was when I stood up. I looked at her parents and said quietly, "Thank you for being honest today. It helps us understand what truly matters to you." They seemed confused. "You're leaving?" her father asked. "Yes," I replied. Because when a relationship begins with judgment, it rarely ends with peace. No one stopped us as we walked out. In the car, my son didn't speak for several minutes. When he finally did, his voice was low. "Amy, why didn't you tell them the truth about us?" I looked at him and answered honestly. Because they needed to show us theirs first. That night, my phone buzzed with a message. "Thank you for today," it read. "For standing up. For showing me that dignity still matters." I held the phone in my hand for a long time. Chapter 2 did not end with resolution. It ended with clarity. I now knew exactly what kind of people we were dealing with. And more importantly, I knew that when the truth about me finally came out, the truth they had judged without knowing, it would not just surprise them. It would confront them. And that confrontation was coming the day the truth came out. After the second meeting, silence followed, but it was not empty silence. It was heavy, loaded with anticipation. Days passed without any calls from their side. No messages. No attempts to smooth things over. That silence itself was an answer. But I was not done. I had not pretended to be poor out of insecurity. I had done it for clarity. And clarity had a purpose. One evening, my son sat across from me and finally asked the question he had been holding inside. "Am I? What happens now?" I looked at him carefully. He was no longer confused. He was ready. "Now," I said, "we stop hiding." He didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A family gathering was planned on their side, a formal dinner where close relatives would be present. A message arrived, polite but distant, inviting us. I knew exactly why. They wanted one last evaluation. This time, I did not dress simply. I wore an elegant but understated outfit. No excess, no show, just quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't ask for attention but commands it anyway. My son noticed immediately. "You look different," he said. "I look like myself," I replied. When we arrived, the atmosphere shifted the moment I stepped inside. Conversation slowed. Eyes followed. People who had barely acknowledged me before now stood up to greet me. Not because I demanded respect, but because something about me made them reassess. My future daughter-in-law's parents looked unsettled. Her mother approached first. "You didn't mention you were so well put together," she said, attempting a smile. I smiled back gently. "You didn't ask." Dinner was served, but no one was truly eating. The curiosity was louder than hunger. Questions began to surface, subtle at first. "What does your husband do? Which area do you live in? How long has your family been in the city?" This time, I answered honestly. Calmly. Clearly. I spoke about our family business. About years of hard work. About values we had built everything on. I did not exaggerate. I did not boast. I simply told the truth. With every sentence, the room changed. Faces tightened. Smiles faded. Whispers started. And then came the moment that sealed everything. My future daughter-in-law's father cleared his throat and said carefully, "We didn't realize your background was so established." I met his eyes. "You didn't want to," I replied. The silence that followed was deafening. I continued, not raising my voice, not accusing, just stating facts. When we first met, I chose simplicity. I wanted to see how I would be treated without titles, without comfort, without assumptions working in my favor. Her mother shifted uncomfortably. "And what did you find?" someone asked. I paused. I found that respect was conditional. No one interrupted. I found that kindness disappeared when you believed I had less. That dignity was measured in possessions. And that judgment came before understanding. My son sat beside me, silent but strong. Then my future daughter-in-law spoke. She stood up, her voice steady. "This is why I spoke up before," she said. Because I didn't want to be part of a marriage built on pride and comparison. Her parents looked shocked, not by my truth, but by the alignment between us. Her father tried to regain control. "We never meant any disrespect," he said. I nodded. Disrespect doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles. That was the moment everything changed. I stood up and said the words I had been preparing for weeks. My son deserves a family that values him for who he is, not what they assume he brings. And I deserve to be treated with dignity, whether I walk in wearing gold or nothing at all. No one argued. Because there was nothing left to argue. As we left that night, my son exhaled deeply, as if releasing weeks of tension. Thank you. I placed my hand on his shoulder. Truth doesn't need volume, I said. It needs timing. Later that night, I received another message from her. You showed them what I couldn't put into words. No matter what happens, thank you. I read it slowly. Chapter 3 was not about victory. It was about revelation. Because once the truth is known, pretending becomes impossible. And from that moment on, everyone involved had to choose between pride and growth, between appearances and values. The story was no longer about whether this marriage would happen. It was about who deserved to be part of it. When consequences knock louder than apologies. After the truth was revealed, everything changed, but not all at once. Change rarely arrives dramatically. Sometimes, it seeps in slowly, quietly, forcing people to sit with their own reflections. For the first time since this journey began, I felt no urgency. The truth had been spoken. Now, it was time to watch what people did with it. The days that followed were filled with unusual silence from their side. No invitations. No formal calls. No polite check-ins. Instead, there were indirect messages, questions passed through relatives, carefully worded inquiries disguised as concern. Is everything okay? They didn't mean it like that. Misunderstandings happen in families. I had heard these lines before. They usually appear when pride begins to crack. My son noticed it too. They're trying to come back, he said one evening. Not yet, I replied. They're trying to save face. There is a difference. Then came the phone call. It was her father. His voice was softer than before, not warm, but cautious. The confidence that once shaped his words was gone. We've been thinking, he said, about everything that was said. I listened without interrupting. We may have misunderstood each other, he continued. Perhaps we were too focused on practical matters. Practical. Again. I replied calmly, practical matters reveal priorities. And priorities reveal character. There was a pause. We would like to meet again, he said. Properly this time. I agreed, not because I owed them anything, but because closure should be intentional, not accidental. The meeting was set at a neutral place. No homes. No territory. Just people. When we arrived, I noticed how different they looked. Less composed. Less certain. The confidence of judgment had been replaced by the discomfort of self-awareness. They stood when I entered. A small gesture, but an important one. Her mother spoke first. We want to apologize if anything we said came across as hurtful. If. Apologies that include if are not apologies, they are negotiations. I didn't correct her. I waited. Her father cleared his throat. We didn't know your background. Had we known, things might have been different. That was the moment I had been waiting for. I leaned forward slightly and said, that is exactly the problem. They looked confused. Respect that depends on information is not respect, I continued. It's evaluation. And dignity should never be something you earn by proving your worth. My son sat beside me, quiet but steady. He didn't need to speak, his presence said enough. Then she arrived. My future daughter-in-law walked in a few minutes late. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried exhaustion, the kind that comes from standing between two worlds. She greeted us respectfully and sat down. Her parents avoided her eyes. She spoke softly, but clearly. I need to understand something, she said. If Amy had stayed silent, if she had never revealed who she was, would this apology still exist? No one answered. That silence was louder than any argument. Her mother finally said, we just want what's best for you. She nodded. Then trust me to know what that is. I felt a quiet pride in her. She was no longer asking for permission. She was setting boundaries. Her father sighed. We were raised differently, he said. Society pressures. I raised my hand gently. Society doesn't speak, I said. People do. There was no anger in my voice. Only finality. Then came the question they had been circling since the beginning. So, what happens now? Her father asked. I looked at my son. Then at her. This is not my decision alone, I said. It never was. My son spoke. I love your daughter, he said. But I won't build a marriage on tolerance. It has to be built on respect, for her and for my mother. She took a breath and said, and I won't enter a marriage where I spend my life defending my worth. Her parents finally understood something they had avoided for too long. This was no longer about them. After a long pause, her father nodded slowly. Then perhaps, he said, we need time to reflect. I stood up. Reflection is valuable, I said. But growth is a choice. We left that meeting without anger, without victory, without defeat. Just clarity. That night, my son asked me quietly, Amy, did we do the right thing? I looked at him and smiled. We chose dignity, I said. That's never wrong. Later, I received a message from her. Whatever happens, thank you for showing me that respect doesn't beg. I stared at the screen for a long time. Chapter 4 was not about reconciliation. It was about consequence. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson is not losing something, but realizing why you never deserved it in the first place. And the final chapter of this story was still waiting to be written. The choice that defined everything. The days after that meeting felt strangely peaceful. Not empty, just quiet in a way that allowed reflection. There were no calls, no messages, no attempts to persuade or pressure. For the first time since this story began, no one was trying to control the outcome. And that silence gave everyone the space they needed to confront their own truths. My son seemed lighter. Not relieved, exactly, but grounded. As if a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally been put down. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, he spoke softly. I think I already know what the right decision is. I just need to say it out loud. I looked at him, giving him the time he needed. I love her, he continued. But love shouldn't feel like a constant negotiation. And it shouldn't require you to prove your worth again and again. I nodded. Love that demands explanation eventually turns into exhaustion, I said. A few days later, I received a message from her. Can we talk? Just us? We met at a quiet cafe, no parents, no expectations, no audience. She arrived looking calm but tired. The kind of tiredness that comes from fighting battles that shouldn't exist in the first place. She spoke first. I've thought about everything, she said. About my parents. About you. About him. And about myself. I listened. I realized something, she continued. I've spent my life trying to soften my parents' thinking instead of standing firm in my own. That honesty moved me more than any apology ever could. I don't want a marriage where I'm constantly translating between two worlds, she said. I want partnership. Peace. Respect. I looked at her and replied honestly, and I want the same for my son. There was no drama in that conversation. No tears. No raised voices. Just clarity, the kind that feels heavy but right. When we parted, there were no promises made. And none were needed. That night, my son and I talked again. He didn't ask for advice. He didn't need reassurance. He had already chosen integrity over comfort. We should step back, he said. Not out of anger. Out of self-respect. And that was it. The decision was communicated respectfully. Calmly. Without blame. There were reactions, of course, disappointment, shock, attempts to reframe the situation. But none of it changed the outcome. Because this time, the decision wasn't driven by fear of loss. It was driven by clarity. Weeks passed. Life slowly returned to its rhythm. And then, one afternoon, I received a final message from her parents. We understand now. We wish things had been different. I read it carefully. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt acceptance. Not everyone learns lessons at the same time. Some learn early. Some learn late. And some only learn when consequences arrive uninvited. That evening, my son said something that stayed with me. "Amy, thank you for pretending to be poor." I smiled. "I wasn't pretending," I replied. "I was revealing." This story was never about money. It was never about status. It was about how people behave when they believe they have power, and how they change when they realize they don't. I had walked into that family's home dressed in simplicity, carrying no signs of wealth. And in doing so, I had uncovered something far more valuable than acceptance. I had uncovered truth. And truth, once revealed, cannot be unseen. If there is one lesson I carry forward, it is this. Anyone can respect you when they believe you are equal. But only the right people respect you when they believe you are less. The rest, no matter how polite, educated, or socially acceptable they appear, are simply wearing better masks. This chapter closed not with regret, but with dignity. And dignity, once chosen, never asks for permission what remained after the masks fell. Time has a strange way of revealing what truly mattered all along. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly settled into a new rhythm, quieter, steadier, and unexpectedly lighter. The noise that once surrounded decisions, judgments, and expectations had faded, leaving behind something far more valuable: peace. My son changed in ways that surprised even me. He became more confident, not louder, but clearer. He no longer second-guessed his choices or explained himself unnecessarily. It was as if walking away from a conditional future had given him back a part of himself he didn't know he was losing. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, he said something simple that stayed with me. "I didn't lose anything, Amy. I escaped something." And he was right. People often confuse endings with loss. But not every ending takes something away. Some endings return you to yourself. From time to time, we heard small updates through mutual connections. Her parents had struggled to explain the broken engagement to relatives. Stories were adjusted. Details softened. Responsibility blurred. Society always finds a way to protect pride. But the truth remained unchanged. They had judged too early. They had valued too shallowly. And by the time they understood, the moment had passed. As for her, my would-be daughter-in-law, she chose distance, not rebellion. She moved forward quietly, focusing on her career and independence. Once, she sent me a message that I still read sometimes. "You taught me that respect isn't requested, it's recognized. And if it isn't, you walk away." That message told me everything I needed to know about the kind of woman she was becoming. I thought often about the role I had played in this story. Pretending to be poor had never been about deception. It had been about stripping away distractions. Money, status, and appearance often blur judgment. When those things disappear, behavior becomes honest. People show you who they are when they believe you have nothing to offer them. That is when truth speaks the loudest. I realized that society trains us to impress, to prove, to display. But it never teaches us how to observe. It never teaches us the courage of simplicity or the power of silence. Had I walked into that family's home dressed in luxury, I would have been welcomed, praised, respected, not for who I was, but for what I represented. And that illusion might have lasted just long enough to trap my son in a life of constant compromise. Instead, I chose invisibility. And in doing so, I saw everything. This chapter of my life didn't end with celebration or victory. It ended with understanding. And understanding, unlike approval, does not fade with time. If there is one truth I hope stays with you after this story, it is this. Anyone can be kind when they see benefit. But character reveals itself when kindness has no reward. Choose people who respect you in your quiet moments, not just your successful ones. Choose relationships that don't require constant explanation. Choose dignity, even when it costs you comfort. Because comfort fades. But dignity stays. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance a mother can give her child is not wealth or connections, but the courage to walk away. Before you go, answer this honestly. Have you ever been judged when people thought you had nothing and treated differently when they thought you had something? Share your experience in the comments. Backhand index pointing down your story might help someone else find clarity. If this series moved you, like the video. If it made you reflect, subscribe. And if it reminded you of someone you care about, share it. Because sometimes, the quietest stories leave the loudest lessons.